A divorce, a fainting spell, and a shocking truth. The day of the divorce, it all seemed to be over, until she fainted in front of him. But nothing could prepare him for what he would discover at the hospital, a truth capable of changing everything. Now, the past comes knocking. A lost love, a second chance, or a definitive goodbye. Watch until the end and discover how an unexpected twist can change destinies forever. The silence between them was deafening. The civil registry had that unbearable smell of old paper and fresh ink, a bureaucratic scent that had nothing to do with the story they had just closed. Amelia and Ethan sat opposite each other, separated by a cold table and a pile of papers that sealed what was once love. She held the pen tightly, not from indecision, but to keep her fingers from trembling. Her name was already there, printed in black ink, just waiting for the last signature. Ethan's. He, for his part, kept his expression immobile, as he always did. His features were rigid, his dark eyes concealing any trace of emotion. He took the pen with the precision of someone accustomed to definitive decisions. The stroke on the paper was quick, firm. No hesitation. Done. No tears were shed, no protest or last attempt at a fix, just a discreet gesture of farewell. Amelia felt the weight in her chest, not of regret, but of exhaustion. It wasn't just the divorce, it was the months of wear and tear, the sleepless nights, the effort to keep her dignity intact while everything around her fell apart. And now, there was nothing left to hold on to. She picked up the documents with rigid fingers and stood up. The movement was small, insignificant, but inside her, something broke. The room spun. First, a high-pitched buzz in her ears, then darkness. The impact wasn't hard, but the sound of her body hitting the floor made Ethan's world collapse. He was at her side before anyone else could react. His voice, always so controlled, broke in panic. "Amelia, Amelia, talk to me." She didn't respond. Her face was pale, her lips slightly parted, as if she were trying to breathe. Time seemed to drag as the registry employees ran, their voices a distant echo. But Ethan only saw Amelia. He only heard the sound of his own heart beating erratically in his chest. "Call an ambulance!" His voice was a roar. The following minutes were a blur of sirens and red lights reflected in the glass of the buildings. Ethan didn't let go of her hand for a second. Even unconscious, Amelia's skin was warm. He didn't know why that mattered so much. He didn't know why, after signing those papers, feeling her weak pulse under his fingers caused him a desperation he hadn't felt in a long time. But then, at the hospital, everything changed. The smell of antiseptic and the monotonous sound of monitors came before her eyes opened. Amelia blinked against the white light of the room and felt the world spin slightly. The white ceiling, the pale walls, all so sterile, so empty. And then she saw him. Ethan was there. The impeccable suit from a few hours ago was now wrinkled, the tie knot loose. But what really caught her attention were his eyes. He looked at her as if he had seen a ghost, as if he were lost. Before Amelia could say anything, the door opened and a doctor came in. The man held a folder with an expression that was too professional for what he was about to say. "Mrs. Marquez, we have your exams." He paused. "Your fainting was caused by a drop in pressure, something common, considering your condition." Amelia frowned. "My condition?" The doctor paused, as if he expected her to already know. But she didn't. "Congratulations. You're pregnant. 3 months." The silence that followed was absolute. Amelia blinked. Her mind raced in 1,000 directions, trying to process the words, looking for some flaw in the logic, some explanation that wasn't that. Pregnant. She was pregnant. And when her gaze finally met Ethan's, She knew nothing would ever be the same. He wasn't breathing. His eyes, which always hid everything, now were open in a way that she had never seen before. For the first time in his life, Ethan was completely lost. The end of them had become the beginning of something much bigger. What do you think is going through Ethan's mind right now? Does he feel anything, or is he truly empty? Comment your thoughts below. A past of control. Amelia felt the air weigh heavily around her. The doctor's words still floated in the silence of the room, as if time had refused to move forward since the moment they were spoken. Pregnant. She didn't know why that hit her so hard. It wasn't as if she had never considered the possibility. There were symptoms she had ignored. Fatigue she attributed to the stress of the divorce. Nausea she treated as anxiety. It all made sense now. But knowing was different from feeling. And in that instant, she felt the impact like an electric shock running through every fiber of her body. Ethan still stood there, motionless, his eyes fixed on her, as if he were waiting for a reaction, a confirmation, anything that would help him process the new reality. But Amelia had no answers. She averted her gaze, fixing it on a spot on the white sheet. She needed something solid, something that wouldn't move under her feet. "This changes nothing." The words came out before she could stop them. Cold, firm, a barrier she was trying to build between herself and the confusion expanding within her. But Ethan noticed. He always noticed. The slight trembling in her voice, the way her hands, resting on the sheet, were slightly clenched. He took a step forward. Amelia felt his energy invade the space between them. The familiar, woody scent of his cologne, an odor she knew better than she would have liked. He was always there, on her skin, on her sheets, in the moments when they were still a couple, and she allowed herself to believe it could be forever. But now, she had to maintain control. "This is our son, Amelia." His voice didn't have the firmness it used to have. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't an order. It was a fact, one that carried the weight of everything they had lost, and of what, in some way, still existed between them. Amelia looked up. The clash between them was palpable. Ethan didn't look like the same man who had signed those papers at the registry a few hours earlier. That man was cold, distant, as if nothing could touch him. But this man, standing in front of her, had a face marked by the impact of the news, his dark eyes filled with something she didn't want to decipher. Because if she looked for too long, she might find vestiges of the love she was trying to bury. She breathed slowly, feeling the metallic taste of uncertainty on her tongue. "I don't need you for this, Ethan." She saw him blink, as if the phrase had been an unexpected blow. "Don't be ridiculous." The response came out sharp, cutting, but the anger wasn't in his voice. It was somewhere else, deeper, more dangerous. She refused to back down. "Ridiculous? For not wanting you to interfere in my life? In your life?" He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "This isn't just about you, Amelia." She clenched her teeth. "Oh no. Because it seems that, until a few minutes ago, none of this existed for you. You signed those papers, Ethan. I'm no longer your wife." He leaned slightly forward, reducing the distance between them. "But I'm still the father of this child." Amelia felt her heart race, but she kept her face impassive. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, an impatient gesture she knew well. He was fighting something inside himself. "Do you really think you can exclude me from this?" The truth? She didn't know. She didn't know how to deal with it. She didn't know how to move forward without feeling the weight of the past pressing on her shoulders. I need time." It was the first truly sincere thing she had said since the impact of that news hit her. He was silent for a moment, watching her as if trying to decipher every thought she couldn't yet organize. "I'm not going anywhere, Amelia." She closed her eyes. That was what she feared. Because no matter how much she tried to deny it, A part of her wanted to believe that he was telling the truth, and that part was too dangerous to be heard. Amelia averted her gaze, feeling the suffocating weight of Ethan's presence in the room. He was still there, watching her with that intensity that always left her vulnerable. But now, there was no room for vulnerability, not after everything they had been. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to find a vestige of calm within the whirlwind forming in her mind. But all she found was the echo of a past that had never completely left her. The history between them was never common. At first, it seemed invincible. The first meeting was by chance, one of those moments that destiny orchestrates with surgical precision. Amelia was in Rome for a conference. Ethan was there for a business meeting. Two strangers in a foreign city, united by chance and by the undeniable spark that arose as soon as their eyes met. He was confident, charming in a way that wasn't limited to words. There was something in the way he looked at her, as if he saw something in her that no one else saw. Amelia was never one to be carried away by impulses, but that night, when Ethan invited her to dinner, she accepted without hesitation. Rome was the beginning. It was nights in dimly lit restaurants, whispered conversations about dreams and ambitions, promises murmured between sheets. Amelia had never felt anything like it before. The world seemed more vibrant when she was with him, more intense. And Ethan made her feel alive in a way no one else ever had. When they returned home, it didn't take long for everything to become even more serious. The courtship quickly evolved into an engagement, and in a short time, into a marriage that, at first glance, seemed perfect. But perfection was an illusion. The first signs of wear came silently, like small cracks in a wall that, from afar, still seemed intact. Ethan was always a man of insatiable ambition. He didn't just want the best, he demanded the best. He was meticulous, strategic, determined to build an empire that would be unbreakable. And at first, Amelia admired that in him. But she soon realized that his ambition consumed everything around him, including her. The nights, once filled with long dinners and laughter, became lonely. Ethan spent more time in meetings than at home. When he came back, it was too late for any meaningful conversation. The silence began to grow between them, occupying the space that was once filled with didziposa, laughter and love. Amelia tried to convince herself that it was just a phase, that everything would go back to normal. But then the demands came. Ethan was never the type to raise his voice. He never explicitly forbade her from anything. But there was always a comment, a suggestion, a look that said more than words. "You don't need to work anymore. I can give you everything. This dress is a little daring, don't you think? I don't think it's a good idea for you to travel alone. What will people think?" At first, they were small concessions, nothing that seemed big enough to be a problem. But little by little, she realized that she was disappearing inside the marriage. Invitations to events became rarer. Outings with friends became a reason for veiled discussions. Amelia no longer recognized the woman she saw in the mirror, and when she tried to talk about it, when she gathered the courage to tell Ethan that she felt suffocated, that she needed space for herself, he simply didn't listen. "That's all in your head, Amelia. I just want the best for you. The best." What Ethan never understood is that the best for her was not what he thought was right. The first time she asked for time, Ethan laughed. He really laughed, as if the idea were absurd. "You're being dramatic." The second time, he was silent for a few seconds before simply changing the subject. And the third, when Amelia could no longer breathe within the marriage, he looked at her with disbelief. "I don't know what else you need. I've given you everything. Everything. Except freedom. Except choice. Except the feeling that she still owned her own life." That's how their love was lost. Not in a big scandal, not in a devastating betrayal, but in the slow and irreversible wear of a marriage that stopped being a home. And now, there, in the hospital, forced to face the man she once loved more than anything, Amelia felt as if she were back in that moment. The past was infiltrating the present like a ghost that refused to disappear. Ethan was no longer her husband. He no longer had control over her. But somehow, he still had power over her feelings. And that terrified her. She breathed slowly, trying to keep her voice firm. "You can want to be a part of this, Ethan, but I don't know if I want you near me." He didn't blink. "Do you still hate me that much?" Amelia pursed her lips. "Hate you?" She shook her head. "I don't hate you, Ethan. That's the problem." For a moment he seemed confused, but then something shone in his eyes. Understanding, and a flash of something else. Hope. "This isn't over, Amelia." She felt her heart clench. "It is over, Ethan. We signed those papers. But a piece of paper doesn't erase what we were." Amelia looked away. "But it can prevent us from being something again." The answer hung in the air. The past haunted them. And, whether they wanted to or not, they would have to face it. Do you think Ethan can truly change? What do you think is the hardest part for Amelia? Comment your thoughts below. A test of true love. Ethan was never a man who accepted defeat. For him, everything was a matter of strategy, planning, control. He always knew exactly what he wanted and how to get it. He had built his career that way. He kept his life organized that way. The world was a chessboard, and he was always the most skilled player. But Amelia was never a piece in that game. And now, for the first time in his life, Ethan didn't know what to do. He watched her from the other side of the room, his arms crossed over his chest as if trying to protect himself from her proximity. Since they had received the news of the pregnancy, Amelia had pulled away more each day, rejecting any attempt at a closer relationship. But there were moments when he saw her resistance waver, when their eyes met for too long, when their fingers touched by accident, when the silence between them became denser than the words they were trying to say to each other. She still felt something for him. He knew it. But would it be enough? Ethan clenched his jaw and looked away toward the window. Outside, the day stretched out, indifferent to the chaos inside him. He hated that feeling of powerlessness, that uncertainty crawling under his skin like a poison. He needed to prove that he had changed. But how? Because if he was honest with himself, he didn't know exactly how to change. Amelia had always been his exception, his ruin and his salvation. And now, everything depended on his ability to convince her that he would never leave her alone again. He turned to look at her again, watching the way she kept her gaze fixed on the floor, her arms still crossed like an invisible barrier. "You can't push me away from this, Amelia." She lifted her eyes slowly, and he saw the internal battle reflected there. "I'm not trying to push you away, but that doesn't mean I trust you." Ethan took a deep breath, holding back the instinctive response he wanted to give. The older version of himself would have replied, tried to argue with logic, proving with well-structured words that he was right. But that had never worked with Amelia, and if he wanted her to believe in him, he would have to act differently. He took a step forward. Amelia didn't back away, but her body tensed. "I know words aren't enough, but if you give me the chance, I'm going to prove that I'm different." She laughed, but there was no humor in her laugh. "Do you think this is a contract, Ethan? Something that can be solved with promises and guarantees?" He studied her for a moment before answering. "No, I think it's much more than that." The answer took her by surprise. Amelia blinked, her lips parted, as if she were about to argue, but nothing came out. He moved a little closer, just enough to feel her accelerated breathing. "Let me be here." She held his gaze. "And when things get difficult, Will you still be here? He didn't hesitate. Yes. And when work demands all of you, I choose you. Amelia closed her eyes for a moment, as if she were absorbing those words. When she opened them again, Ethan realized that she wasn't ready to give in. Not yet. But something in her had changed. He saw it in the way she didn't back away this time, and how her eyes lingered on his for a little longer before she looked away. It still wasn't enough, but it was a start. The following days passed in a strange rhythm, as if Amelia lived between two worlds. On one hand, the past, a persistent memory of what she and Ethan had been, of the broken promises, of the wear and tear that made her ask for time and then a divorce. On the other, the present, an inescapable reality where her body harbored a new life, and Ethan was there, more present than he had ever been before. She wanted to cling to logic, to convince herself that nothing had changed, that Ethan was the same man as before, just temporarily improving because of the impact of the pregnancy. But with each passing day, it became harder to maintain that certainty. He was there, not just physically, but emotionally, in a way he had never been. At the first ultrasound, Amelia went alone. She wanted that for herself, without his presence altering her feelings. But the moment she heard the sound of the baby's heart for the first time, something inside her collapsed. And then, leaving the office, Ethan was there, waiting for her. "How was it?" he asked, without rush, without demands. Amelia looked at him with a serious expression, but with something new, a contained anxiety. She wanted him to be there. She hesitated, but for some reason, she handed him the small ultrasound photo. The silence stretched as Ethan looked at the image, and then, without saying a word, he put the photo in his wallet, as if it were the most precious thing he had ever had. Amelia looked away, feeling her chest tighten. She couldn't give in. But for the first time, she also didn't know if she wanted to keep running away. The days turned into weeks, and Ethan did not retreat. He was present. He wasn't invasive. He didn't try to rush her, but he was there. When Amelia felt morning sickness and needed something to relieve it, he already knew what to bring. When fatigue overcame her in the middle of the day, he appeared without warning, leaving a decaf coffee and a pillow for her back in her office chair. When she woke up in the middle of the night, scared by the weight of the responsibility growing inside her, she would find a short message on her phone. "If you need anything, I'm here." And somehow, that simple phrase calmed her. She began to see him differently. Or perhaps she began to allow herself to see a side of him that had always been there, but had been obscured by the fears and wounds she carried. Ethan listened. He was no longer the same man who ignored her feelings, who changed the subject when she said she needed space. Now, when she spoke, he listened. He didn't try to fix her. He didn't try to convince her of anything. He simply listened, and that disarmed her more than anything else. But then came the first great test. It was late when Amelia left work. She felt exhausted, as if she were carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. As she drove home, her mind was a chaos of disconnected thoughts. She needed a hot bath. She needed to sleep. She needed to forget for a moment that her life was completely out of control. When she arrived in the building, she found Ethan leaning against his car, his hands in his coat pockets, the expression unreadable. She felt her heart race. "What are you doing here?" He hesitated for a second before answering. "We need to talk." Amelia closed her eyes for a moment, too tired for another argument. "Not today, Ethan. It's important," she scoffed, crossing her arms. "Everything is important to you now, isn't it?" He held her gaze. "Yes, because you're important." The words hit her like a fist. Ethan had never been good at admitting his feelings, but now he did it with a disconcerting simplicity. Amelia felt her throat tighten. "What do you want?" He took a deep breath. "I need to know how far this goes, Amelia. I need to know if I have a chance." She looked away. "I can't give you that answer now." He felt it. "Then I'll wait." Amelia held her breath. "What if I'm never ready?" Ethan took a step forward, reducing the distance between them. "Then I'll wait anyway." That was the first time Amelia cried since it all began. And it was the first time Ethan didn't try to fix her. He was just there, holding her hand, letting her feel everything she needed to feel. She didn't know if she could choose him again, but in that moment, she began to realize that maybe she no longer needed to keep running away. The months passed in a blur. Time, which once seemed like a relentless enemy, now became a silent ally, allowing Amelia and Ethan to navigate this new reality at a pace they could both bear. He was still there, present at every appointment, attentive to every detail, always making sure she didn't have to carry that burden alone. And Amelia, little by little, began to allow herself to trust it. Not completely, not without reservations, but enough to accept the hot coffee he handed her without her having to ask, to let him accompany her home when she was too tired to drive, enough to allow him to be near. And then, in an instant, everything fell apart. It was an ordinary day. Or at least, it should have been. Amelia left the doctor's office with a discreet smile. The pregnancy was going well, the baby was healthy, and for the first time in a long time, she felt light. Until she saw Ethan on the other side of the street. She knew he would come to pick her up. He always did lately. But there was something different about him that day. Something tense, rigid. Amelia frowned and crossed the street, feeling the uneasiness grow in her chest. "Is everything okay?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. His jaw was tense, his dark eyes filled with something she couldn't decipher. And then he blurted out, "Were you with him?" Amelia blinked. Confused. With who? Noah. The name came out loaded with venom, and it was only then that Amelia understood. Noah was her old co-worker, a friend, someone who had been close when her marriage was starting to fall apart, offering her support without ever crossing any lines. But Ethan had always hated Noah. He always saw him as a threat, even though Amelia had assured him countless times that there was nothing between them beyond friendship. She felt her chest tighten. "Ethan, I ran into him by chance. We talked for a few minutes and that's it." But he was no longer listening to her. "Sure, it was just a coincidence, right? The same guy who spent years waiting for me to make a mistake so he could get closer to you." Ethan's tone was getting harder, colder. And in that instant, Amelia felt transported back to the past. To a time when her every word was analyzed with suspicion, when her every move was a possible threat to the control Ethan insisted on having over her. And the worst part? She saw in his eyes that he also perceived it, that he saw the exact moment she closed herself off again. But instead of backing away, he moved forward. "Are you still talking to him?" His voice was low, but loaded with something somber. Amelia crossed her arms. "I'm not going to answer those kinds of questions." Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in his laugh. "Of course not, because you're never wrong, are you, Amelia?" She felt a knot form in her throat. Didn't he realize what he was doing? "Ethan, stop." But he didn't. "I should have known. You've always had a great knack for trusting the wrong people." The words were said without thinking, but the impact was immediate. Amelia stood motionless, her eyes wide, her breath caught in her chest. And then, something inside her broke. The silence that came afterward was worse than any scream. "I'm not doing this again." Her voice came out low, but firm. Ethan realized it too late. "Amelia," but she was already walking away. "You promised you had changed. He ran a hand over his face, as if trying to contain something within himself. I did change. Then why do you keep trying to control me? He had no answer. Amelia let out a slow breath, feeling her chest tremble. I need space. No. Ethan's response was immediate. But this time, it wasn't an order. It was a plea. Don't push me away, Amelia. She closed her eyes. Then give me a reason not to. The silence that followed was devastating, and when Ethan finally tried to speak, it was too late. She was already gone. The final betrayal and the ultimate choice. In the following days, Ethan tried to call, tried to stop by her apartment, tried to find any way to undo that mistake. But Amelia didn't answer. And then, when he finally went to her house, he found the door locked, the lights off, and a neighbor who looked at him with pity. She traveled, the man said. Ethan felt his stomach sink. Traveled? Where? I don't know, man. I just know she rented out the house for a while. She said she was going to take a break in the city. Ethan stood there, unable to react. Amelia was gone. She was really gone. And this time, maybe she wouldn't come back. He felt his heart pound in his chest, his breath short. His mind told him that was it, that he had lost her. But then, for the first time in his life, Ethan realized that just wanting to change wasn't enough. He would have to prove it, and above all, he would have to be patient. Amelia was far away, and he didn't know if she would ever return. But if she did, he would be ready. This time, without trying to control her, without trying to convince her, just waiting. Because, for the first time, he was willing to be a man who deserved to be by her side. And, if he had to wait forever, he would. She was gone. The emptiness that remained after Amelia walked away was worse than anything Ethan had ever felt. It wasn't just the anger that pulsed in his mind, or the frustration of having returned to being the man he promised he would never be again. It was the fear of having lost her forever. In the following days, he tried to give her space, but her silence was unbearable. Amelia didn't reply to his messages. She didn't answer his calls. He stopped by her apartment, but she didn't open the door. And then, when he finally decided to back off and wait for her to come to him, fate showed him that it would not give him that luxury. The call came in the middle of the night. The hospital number shone on his cell phone screen, and everything inside him froze. Mr. Ethan Hayes? The sound of his own name made his heart pound painfully against his ribs. Yes! You need to come to the hospital now. It's about Amelia. He didn't remember the trip there. Only the metallic taste of panic in his mouth, his trembling hands on the steering wheel, the suffocating feeling that, if anything happened to her or the baby, he would never forgive himself. When he arrived, the hospital was bathed in that cold, indifferent light, and the antiseptic smell seemed stronger than usual. He crossed the hallways with long strides until he found a nurse who recognized him immediately. Where is she? The woman hesitated for a second. Mrs. Marquez was admitted with complications. They had to take her to surgery. The word hit Ethan like a punch. Surgery? She had a premature placental abruption. The situation is delicate, but the doctors are doing everything they can. Delicate. The word echoed in his mind as the world around him lost its shape. He sat down in the nearest chair, but he couldn't feel anything beneath him. It was as if he were floating, as if his very existence had been reduced to that moment. And then, for the first time in his life, Ethan understood what it meant to be completely powerless. There was nothing he could do, no strategy he could devise, no money he could pay to fix this. He could only wait and pray. Time became distorted. Each minute felt like an eternity. And then, finally, a doctor appeared. Ethan stood up with a jump, his heart pounding. How is she? The doctor sighed, and Ethan felt the weight of that sound even before the words were spoken. The baby is in fetal distress. We need to act quickly." It was then that Ethan understood what that meant. They had to choose, save Amelia or save the baby. The ground seemed to disappear under his feet. "We will do everything possible for both of them," the doctor said, trying to stay calm. "But Mr. Hayes, if we have to prioritize one of them, we need your decision now. The decision. The moment that would define everything." He looked toward the closed door of the room where Amelia was. Would he lose her? After everything, after finally understanding that he loved her in a way he had never comprehended before, after realizing that she was the center of everything, would he have to let her go? And then, for a second, a memory came to his mind. Amelia. The first time she felt the baby move, bringing her hands to her belly with a smile of pure adoration. Amelia, stroking the ultrasound as if she had known that little life inside her for years. Amelia, saying quietly, one night, without knowing he was listening, "I would do anything for my son." That was it. That was what truly mattered. He closed his eyes for an instant and took a deep breath. And then he looked at the doctor. "Save the baby." The doctor nodded and disappeared down the hallways. And Ethan was left there, alone, feeling the weight of the most difficult decision he had ever made. Time passed slowly, and when the door to the operating room finally opened, everything inside him stopped. Because there, surrounded by nurses, with a tired but living look, was Amelia. She survived, and the baby too. But something was different. Amelia was weak, pale, her eyes heavy from exhaustion and pain. When her eyes finally met his, something shone there. Not anger, not total relief, but something deep. Something between gratitude and incomprehension. She moved her lips, her voice coming out almost as a whisper. You chose the baby?" Ethan's chest tightened. "I chose what you would have chosen." The silence between them was dense, and then the tears came. Not from him, but from her. Amelia wasn't crying out of weakness or pain. She was crying because, for the first time, she saw Ethan understand what it meant to love someone without trying to possess them, without trying to mold them. He understood. And in that instant, Ethan knew that his life would never be the same again. This time, he hadn't fought to win Amelia. He had fought to be the man she deserved. And perhaps, for the first time, he was close to achieving it. What it meant to love someone more than yourself. The story continues below. A new beginning built on trust. And now there, standing in front of the room where Amelia held the small, fragile body of the baby against her chest, Ethan felt something he had never experienced before. The fullness of having done the right thing. The months that followed were a blur of changes. Amelia needed time to recover from the surgery. The baby was under observation for a few weeks, but soon the doctors assured them he was healthy. A boy, small but strong. They named him Leo. It was Amelia who chose the name, and Ethan didn't argue. For the first time, he accepted something without objection. He had already made all the wrong decisions in the past. This one, he wanted it to be hers. But accepting didn't mean everything was easy. Because if there was one thing Ethan had learned, it was that love cannot be forced. Love is conquered, day after day. And that was exactly what he did. Amelia's house became a quiet refuge where time seemed to slow down. Ethan came almost every day, but he didn't intrude. He never crossed the boundaries she set. When Amelia needed to rest, he stayed with Leo. When Leo cried in the middle of the night, he arrived before Amelia could get up. And when she felt lost, exhausted, overwhelmed with it all, Ethan was just there, without demanding, without pressuring, waiting, and Amelia noticed. She realized that, for the first time, Ethan wasn't trying to control her. He wasn't trying to define what they would be. He simply remained present, like a silent certainty, like a firm foundation that she could choose to use, or not. He changed, and so did she. Because, in some moment, Amelia found herself watching him with different eyes. Not the Ethan she had left, not the Ethan she feared, but the Ethan who held Leo in his arms with a tenderness she never imagined he had. The Ethan who wasn't impatient when the baby cried. The Ethan who made her coffee every morning without saying a word, simply leaving the cup on the counter before he left. The Ethan who understood when she needed silence. And, little by little, Amelia felt that the armor she had built began to crack. Time passed. And then, something happened. The first time he touched her again was unintentional. Amelia was on the sofa, holding Leo, when Ethan sat down next to her. He gently ran his hand through the baby's hair, and his arm brushed against hers. An insignificant touch, but Amelia felt it. She felt the warmth of his skin, the familiarity of that gesture. She felt the years come back in a second. She felt her heart race. And when she looked up, Ethan was already watching her. They stayed like that for a moment. Silence, a mutual understanding. And then Amelia looked away, because she wasn't ready yet. But she knew in that instant that it was only a matter of time. The problem was, time didn't wait for them. That night, it was raining hard. Ethan was about to leave when Amelia, who was watching the storm from the window, finally made a decision. "What should I?" The word was said so low that for a second, Ethan thought he had imagined it. But then she turned to look at him, and in her eyes, there was something new, something definitive. He didn't ask if he could, and she didn't need to answer. Because, when he moved closer, Amelia lifted her face to receive him. The kiss was slow, different from all the ones they had shared before. There was no rush. There was no need. It was a choice. And when he pulled his lips from hers, Amelia finally realized. They weren't coming back together because they needed each other. They were coming back together because they wanted each other. This time, their love wasn't a power game. It was a partnership. And finally, it was enough. If you liked this story, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. This helps a lot to keep our content always fresh and full of emotion for you. Thank you very much for joining us and being part of this journey. The meaningful conclusion. This story is a testament that life offers second chances, but they are not a return to the past. They are a rebuilding of the future. Love, at its core, isn't about control or possession. It's about letting go of what you think you need to be, so you can be who you are meant to be for someone else. In the end, Ethan's biggest mistake, his worst failure, became the very catalyst for his greatest triumph. Finding a way to love without controlling, to support without suffocating, and to build a family not on demands, but on partnership. His journey from an empty man to a fulfilled father shows that true strength is not in building an empire, but in the quiet, consistent act of choosing the people you love every single day.